are a lucky people. We live in an exceptionally beautiful country, a land of stunning landscapes, populated by plants and inhabited by birds and other animals found nowhere else. As tangata whenua understand so well, everything in the environment, the land, the animals and the plants, the rivers and the sea are interconnected. The Māori of the people is healthy when the rivers are clean, the forests are full of birds and the seas are teeming with fish. Visitors, now millions every year, come great distances to experience what we often take for granted. And our lifestyle is increasingly attracting our expatriate New Zealanders back, along with other skilled people. And of course, a great part of our economy is based on production from the land and from the sea. But just how clean and green is this country of ours? What is the state of our environment? The last State of the Environment report on the national level was in 2007. It was produced by the Ministry for the Environment. After it came out, there were questions raised about its independence. And as a consequence, we now have a new law that requires regular reporting on the state of our environment, and it's called the Environmental Reporting Act. This Act requires the Ministry for the Environment to work together with Statistics New Zealand to prepare State of the Environment reports. It also provides for the Commissioner to choose to write a commentary. And the idea is that the independence is provided in two ways, by the statutory independence of the government statistician and by the commentary of the Commissioner. Towards the end of last year, the Ministry and Statistics New Zealand produced this State of the Environment report. It's called Environment Aotearoa 2015, and today I'm releasing my commentary on this report. And this is my commentary, and you'd have found a copy on your seat, of course. After the introduction in Chapter 1, my commentary falls into two parts. The first part is what you might expect a commentary to be. It is a critique of Environment Aotearoa 2015, and that's Chapter 2. In the second part, I change tack. I give my view on the state of our environment, and I explain the basis for this. And this is in Chapters 3 and 4, and the final Chapter 5 contains my recommendations. So beginning with Chapter 2, which is my critique, I'm not going to spend much time on this. It has 8 sections, 8 areas where I see the need for improvement in future reports. But when you read Chapter 2, please note that preparing a State of the Environment report is hard work. Environment's complex. While my job is to critique, I do want to commend the staff of both agencies for actually getting this report done. And it has become clear to me that one of the great advantages of the new system is that it will drive more consistent monitoring and reporting by regional councils. So I'm not going to go right through all 8 sections of Chapter 2 now, but I do want to spend a little bit of time on the first section because it is so fundamental. This is what the first section is about, the purpose. Why do we need to report on the state of our environment? Who will use it? What will they use it for? And what difference will it make? When we have another government report, we should always ask why. The environment is vast and complex, and there are zillions of things you can measure. The sky is literally the limit to what you can measure and to the cost. A clear, agreed on purpose is essential. It needs to be front and centre for all those who work on it. And with a clear purpose, you can figure out what you need to measure and report on. So here's my answer to that question. A State of the Environment report should leave its readers with perspective on different environmental issues. It should give us information that actually changes how we think about different environmental issues. What we should worry about a lot, and what we shouldn't worry about at all, and what we should worry about somewhat. So a State of the Environment report should contain conclusions. But Environment Aotearoa New Zealand generally stops short of drawing clear conclusions. It does present some key findings in the form of this infographic. But there is no rationale given as to why the numbers on this infographic are indeed key findings. So what I've done in Chapter 3 is to explain how I think about different aspects of our environment, the process that I go through that helps me to reach conclusions. So how much to worry about different environmental issues? Obviously, this is not any kind of exact science. This is me having a go. And I'm setting aside, for the meantime, questions of social values, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I ask 5 questions about an environmental issue that I'm considering. First, is it irreversible? Can you undo the damage? Secondly, is it cumulative? Does it build up over time? Thirdly, is it large in scale, big, or pervasive across a lot of the country? Fourthly, is it increasing in its scale or pervasiveness, especially if it's accelerating? And lastly, is there a tipping point which, if it passes, would tip the environment into some other state? Now, if there's yes to all of those questions, I worry a lot. All of the questions are about physical characteristics of the environmental issue. Those are just pure physical. They are scientific questions, and some degree of scientific judgment is needed to answer them. Some answers will be clear yeses, sometimes there'll be clear no's, and many will be neither. But if you run through this, you run through these 5 questions for a particular environmental issue and answer with a lot of yeses, taking them all together, what they do is convey a sense of urgency. If you want to do something about this environmental issue, you need to get your skates on. So my idea here is to separate the physical nature of an environmental problem from the values questions, from the do we care questions, because there might be an issue that gets lots of yeses, but people just don't care about it, or the reverse, something that gets lots of no's, but people care about it strongly. So I've separated out those two. In chapter 4, so I explain all that in chapter 3, in chapter 4 I use these 5 questions as a guide to how I think about the state of our environment. And so here are the issues that stand out for me. It's my take on our environment. And no surprise, here's my first issue. Climate change is indisputably a 5 yes issue. Many of you will have seen this graph. It's about the average global temperature, the surface of the Earth, from 1850 until now. It's been measured every month, and you can see the months around the outside of the outside circle. There's a ring at 0 degrees, which is the 1850 base. You can see another ring at 1.5 degrees hotter, and another ring at 2 degrees hotter. And here it goes. Climate change is by far the most serious environmental issue that we face. It has big impacts on virtually every other aspect of our environment, particularly on my second issue, which is the health of our oceans. Long term, the biggest threat to marine biodiversity and commercial fishing is climate change through both acidification and warming. Warm, acidic water that is low in oxygen is going to make life difficult for molluscs like these green-lipped mussels and any other species with a shell. The Northwest Pacific oyster fishery is already showing the effects. It is the canary in the coal mine. Some species like jellyfish will thrive, which is not a particularly nice thought. In looking for standout issues, we have to not only think about what is really significant, but also, to be fair, think about what is less significant. And for me, air quality has become one of those. This is what Christchurch used to be like in the winter. In fact, it used to be worse than that, I remember. We've had a huge improvement over the years, both through technology and government action. I expect it to continue getting better for a number of reasons. Electric cars is one. So I don't consider it particularly worrying. Next, I move to the land. Erosion is a huge issue for this country. It's a natural phenomenon, of course, but our actions have hugely sped it up. The loss of topsoil into waterways is a two-edged sword. Topsoil leaves the land and becomes sediment in waterways. We continue to lose fertility from the land where we want it into water where we don't want it, where it will fertilise plant growth that we don't want. And when rivers become shallower, flooding is worse. Most of this, of course, comes from historic clearance of bush on unstable slopes. My next big issue is also a land one here, which is pests, the animals and plants that have invaded our vulnerable country. It is many, many millions of years since New Zealand was part of Gondwana land. This long separation is what has made our plants and animals so unique and distinctive, but it is also what has made them so vulnerable. New Zealand was once a land of deafening birdsong. We hear a lot about kiwi, but we have many wonderful birds and most of them are in trouble. The kokako is my favourite Before humans arrived, it was everywhere in the North Island. Over the years, its range has shrunk and shrunk. But the critical issue now is not loss of habitat, rather it is the possums, rats and stoats that kill this bird with the haunting song. Extinction is forever. My last big issue is water quality, an area, of course, of high public concern. It's complex. We have lots of high quality fresh water, but it is poor low down in many catchments. And this is not just about rivers, it's also about lakes and wetlands and estuaries and aquifers. So here's my high-level summary on the state of our environment. Air quality is generally good in most places, most of the time. Water quality is very good in undeveloped parts of the country, but this is not the case lower down in many catchments. Much of this is a consequence of historic bush clearance on unstable soils and increasingly intensive farming. Lakes and estuaries are particularly vulnerable. Our native plants and animals are in serious trouble, with most of our iconic bird species in decline. When it comes to the state of our ocean, we simply do not know very much. We do, however, know that climate change, by far the most worrying environmental issue, has begun to warm and acidify the surface waters of the ocean. In the last chapter of my commentary, I have made 5 recommendations aimed at improving future State of the Environment reports. I have also made a 6th recommendation. Today I have talked a lot about purpose, the reason for preparing State of the Environment reports, getting perspective on different issues. But the ultimate purpose, really, is to get this information to help us manage and protect our environment better. So I am seeking a response, an answer to the so what question. And that recommendation is to the Secretary of the Environment that she prepare a formal response to the information in both Environment Aotearoa 2015 and my commentary, outlining options for action and response and making it available to the public. I usually make recommendations to ministers. In this case, I am deliberately directing my recommendation to the Secretary, the Chief Executive of the Ministry. As a public servant, she has the mandate and the resources to prepare an objective and non-partisan response. She can propose options for action on environmental issues that stand out as particularly worrying. But in the end, of course, decisions on actions to take or not to take are the prerogative of the government of the day. But for me, there are 4 areas calling out for a response, for action. The first is concerned with climate change. Specifically here, our carbon dioxide emissions from transport. What do we need to do in this country to create low carbon cities, maybe different from other countries? The second is concerned with our ocean. We need a system of marine protection that is comprehensive, adequate and representative. The third is concerned with our land and our water and indeed with climate change. We need millions of trees on huge areas of unstable hill country by supporting regeneration of native forest and planting trees, to limit erosion, to prevent soil washing into waterways and doing the damage it does, and to store carbon. And finally, pests. While I am delighted that the battle for the birds is underway again, we need to lift our sights from battles that hold the line to winning the war against pests. Thank you.